The prolonged conflict in Ukraine, now stretching well into its third year, has witnessed relentless Ukrainian resilience against formidable odds. While Russian forces have claimed minor territorial gains since the fall of Avdiivka in February, the reality is that these are costly and largely symbolic. Ukraine's strategic countermaneuvers and the staunch defense of key positions like northern Donetsk Oblast and the areas surrounding Bakhmut and Vuhledar in Zaporizhia Oblast underscore a narrative not just of survival, but of calculated resistance. This strategic endurance is all the more remarkable given Ukraine's current artillery challenges. Dubbed shell hunger, this shortfall has seen daily artillery discharges dwindle from 10,000 shells to roughly 2,000. This, coupled with damage to many Ukrainian howitzers due to precise Russian counter-battery efforts and new drone tactics, has undeniably strained Ukraine's defensive capabilities. Yet despite these setbacks, the spirit of Ukrainian forces remains unbroken. In contrast to the narrative of Russian advancement, the reality of the battlefield tells a different story. Russian forces, despite an extensive artillery arsenal and support from rogue states like North Korea, are achieving only marginal gains at an unsustainable cost. Their reliance on volume over tactical efficiency has not translated into decisive success, highlighting the inefficiencies and desperation underlying their military strategy. Amid these challenging dynamics, a beacon of support shines from Denmark. This Scandinavian ally has stepped up, ready to alter the course of events with significant artillery contributions. This move is not just a military aid package, it's a symbol of a shifting European foreign policy landscape that increasingly seeks to support Ukraine's staunch defense efforts. But how transformative could Denmark's involvement be, and what does this mean for the balance of power on the front lines? As Ukraine's defense minister Rustem Umerov advocates for more Western artillery and ammunition, Denmark's commitment could very well be a game-changer. Providing the much-needed artillery might not only alleviate Ukraine's shell hunger, but could also empower Ukrainian forces to reclaim momentum. This support from Denmark and other Western nations underscores a collective international commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty and resilience, setting the stage for a pivotal shift in the ongoing conflict. But how exactly is Denmark stepping up in this crucial hour? Before we explore their pivotal contributions, let's rewind to the events that set this commitment in motion. Just 2 days after the fall of Avdiivka, a bold announcement came from the north. Denmark pledged to donate all of its existing artillery units to Ukraine. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen broke sharply with Europe's cautious stance on arms support, criticizing the continent's hesitancy and highlighting the available resources. This is not only a question about production, because we have weapons, we have ammunition, we have air defenses that we don't have to use ourselves at the moment, that we should deliver to Ukraine. With this declaration, Denmark not only promised critical military support, but also challenged other nations to reassess their positions. You see, to prove the point that such a donation would not be crippling to its arsenal, Denmark's Ministry of Defense said it was in the process of acquiring new military capabilities on a rapid basis to make up for the loss of units. In Munich, Frederiksen also stressed the importance of not waiting for a politically divided United States to take the lead on supplying the Ukrainians. It doesn't matter what the US comes up with. We Europeans have to defend ourselves. This is a war on the European continent. Frederiksen's remarks were the latest example of Denmark's evolving geopolitical strategy, and it's helpful to see Copenhagen's artillery donation in that light. Although Denmark was one of the founding members of the NATO alliance in 1949 and played a pivotal geostrategic role thanks to its control of the Baltic's western choke points, its overall level of security integration with the rest of Europe was not as well advanced. Until June 2022, Denmark was the only one of the European nation's 27 member states which did not participate in the latter's common security policy. Denmark did not take part in the EU defense discussions, nor get involved with the joint military missions. These opt-outs originated with Denmark's initial rejection of the Maastricht Treaty in a 1992 referendum. To secure Denmark's accession to the European Union, Copenhagen was granted a number of exceptions to the Maastricht Treaty through the Edinburgh Agreement. One of these involved defense issues. With these opt-outs in place, Danish voters agreed to join the EU on such terms in a second referendum the following year. This security opt-out policy was in tradition with Denmark's Cold War footing. Although it was a member of NATO, Denmark did not allow any foreign forces on its soil under the alliance's auspices. The Soviet Union was the dominant power in the Baltic and had troops in nearby Germany, troops which outnumbered the West's. Denmark wanted to place itself under America's nuclear umbrella, but did not otherwise want to risk upsetting the Soviet Union. Recent historical experience reminded Danish policymakers of the importance of this goal. British forces only barely prevented the Red Army from pushing on to Denmark when they captured the city of Lübeck in northern Germany on May 2, 1945, only hours before Soviet troops came into the area. The Soviet Union had also occupied the Danish island of Bornholm, which sits on strategic territory in the Baltic, since the previous year. Bornholm is an island roughly in the middle of the strait between Sweden's southern coast and Poland's northern one. A military presence there can cut off movement between east and west in the Baltic. Fortunately for the Danes on Bornholm, Stalin agreed to withdraw the Red Army from the island and did so in April 1946, thus making it a rare example of the Iron Curtain receding in the immediate post-World War II era. However, Stalin's move only came with the understanding that Denmark would not host foreign troops on its soil, even though it was in the West's sphere of influence. American and British policymakers quietly agreed about this, and the unspoken agreement held throughout the Cold War. After the Cold War ended, Denmark slackened on its defense spending. It last spent 2% of its GDP on defense in 1989 and fell to a low of 1.1% in 2015. But that's now starting to change too, as it further integrated itself with European and NATO security networks and gradually ended the policy of quasi-neutrality. Denmark also pledged that it would increase its defense spending and hit the 2% mark by 2033, although there will undoubtedly be many voices in the West that say this rate of increase is too slow. Either way, recent moves in Denmark suggest that its long period of relative military neutrality is coming to an end, and this policy shift has been sanctioned by Danish voters. On June 1, 2022, Denmark held a referendum that asked a simple question. Do you vote yes or no on Denmark being able to participate in the European defense and security cooperation by abolishing the EU defense opt-out? Amidst Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Danish voters chose yes by a margin of nearly 67 to 32%. The vote therefore ended Copenhagen's comparative military isolation from the rest of Europe. The result meant that Danish troops could participate in joint military operations under the EU's banner and have more of an influence in joint European defense policy. More importantly, the result of the referendum made it far easier for the Danish military to acquire weapons and equipment, which is one of the reasons why Copenhagen understands that it can donate all of its artillery to Ukraine. Russia reacted negatively to the news and stopped supplying natural gas to one of Denmark's power companies. Although this did not significantly affect Denmark's energy supply, the move was another demonstration of Russia's willingness to use coercive methods as a means of statecraft. These maneuvers on the part of Moscow likely only further convinced Danish voters that they had made the right decision. Even before the invasion, Denmark was signaling the beginning of its seismic shift in security policy. As Russia was gathering its forces along the Ukrainian border and an invasion seemed imminent, PM Frederiksen suggested that negotiations were ongoing with the United States on a new bilateral defense agreement that could station American troops and military equipment on Danish soil for the first time. Danish Defense Minister Morten Bødskov said any new agreement would be designed to give American forces better access to Europe. The agreement would also likely allow for more cross-training between American and Danish troops, and perhaps more importantly, could make acquiring new military equipment and ammunition easier for the Danes. Once it joined the broader European defense community, Denmark demonstrated its disproportionate willingness to supply Ukraine. It's one of the major donors of F-16 fighter jets, supplying the Ukrainians with 19 of them, which should be sent out by 2025. This is the broader context behind Denmark's more recent decision to donate all of its artillery to Ukraine. Copenhagen's donation of artillery amounts to a small sum, as it has no MLRS units or towed artillery. Rather, the GFI lists Denmark as having 19 self-propelled artillery units, with 15 of them being in a state of readiness. These units are the French-made Caesar self-propelled howitzer. The Caesar entered service in 2008 and has an operational range of about 600 kilometers, with a crew between 3 and 5 operators. Each unit has a typical magazine of 36 shells. The Caesar fires NATO standard 155mm ammunition, up to a range of 34 kilometers and up to 42 kilometers when using an extended range full-bore shell, ERFB. These rounds were originally designed by the Canadian artillery engineer Gerard Bull, who became famous for working on the concept of Saddam Hussein's Project Babylon superguns, Big Babylon and Baby Babylon. Bull was assassinated in 1990, possibly by Israeli agents who did not want to see the Iraqis' superguns become a reality. Unlike standard rounds, these shells are longer and thinner. ERFB rounds have peculiar nubs around their midsections, which help to engage the rifling in the gun and stabilize the projectile in flight, although later ERFB rounds may not have these. ERFB rounds have significantly increased range compared to a standard shell, but at the cost of reduced accuracy. The decreased accuracy has meant that the ERFB round has not become a NATO standard, but the Caesar is nevertheless capable of firing it. The Caesar can increase its range even further, up to a range of 52 kilometers, when it uses rocket-assisted shells. Each Caesar costs about $7.5 million per unit, but the pricing depends on individual contracts. As an example, the acquisition of 52 Caesar howitzers was approved by the Czech Ministry of Defense on September 1, 2021, and the value of that contract is around $288 million. The Caesar has to this point performed well in the war. Correlation does not necessarily equal causation, but it may be more than coincidental that after Ukraine started to receive its Caesar guns, Russian artillery units began to suffer heavy losses. Its introduction, therefore, seems to have coincided with better Ukrainian counter-battery fire. At the height of the Ukrainian gunners' effectiveness, the Russians were supposedly losing between 20 and 40 artillery systems per day. Unfortunately for the Ukrainians, the Caesar was not enough to turn the tide, as the Russians dug in with the benefit of the most elaborate network of fortifications seen in Europe since the First World War. Ukraine's Zaporizhia campaign failed to reach even its first objective, the road junction at Tokmak. As of April 2024, the Oryx blog lists a visually confirmed 8 losses of Caesar units. 5 have been destroyed and 3 damaged. Denmark's donation of its 19 Caesars comes amid new French donations of the unit. Sensing the desperate shortage of artillery for the Ukrainians, France announced in January that it intended to deliver an additional 78 Caesar units to Ukraine and sought €280 million to assist with 60 of these. While Denmark was already sending all of its Caesar artillery units to Ukraine by April 2023, Fredriksson's remarks in Munich were an announcement that it would be sending a different system there too. In addition to the Caesar units, Denmark has 21 X-21 Cardon mortars, which will now be on their way to Ukraine. The Cardon was originally created in Israel and can be chambered to fire 81 or 120mm shells. The 120mm Cordon is muzzle-loaded, but despite this, the mortar has a burst rate of 16 rounds per minute and a sustained rate of fire of around 4 rounds per minute. The Cardon operates on an autonomous recoil system and is controlled by computers, although it can be laid and targeted manually with its backup handles and optical sights if the computerized fire control is compromised. The Cardon has an effective range of about 7.2 kilometers. To improve accuracy, the Danes decided to equip their Cardon mortars with MVRS 700SC muzzle velocity radar systems manufactured by their domestic Weibel company. This system takes account of atmospheric conditions like temperature and humidity, which influence the conditions in the barrel and therefore the muzzle velocity of the mortar's round, which in turn influences the accuracy of its fire. The MVRS 700SC's presence allows the Danish Cardon systems to compensate for environmental conditions and improve their accuracy. This radar system is integrated with the Cardon's computerized fire control system through an antenna and a processor. The Danes received the Cardon in 2019 and specifically sought to use it as mobile firepower. Following Russia's original intervention in Ukraine in 2014, one of the lessons Denmark took away was the vulnerability of artillery to counter battery fire thanks to radar and drone detection. To adapt to this reality, the Danes decided to integrate the Israeli Cardon mortar with their new Piranha 5 armored personnel carrier. The integration better allows the Cardon to deliver fire support and then move away before the enemy can spot it and retaliate. Denmark's decision to send its entire artillery force to Ukraine is the latest sign of a gradually changing philosophy among the Western powers. As the war commenced, Western nations were cautious about escalating the conflict, hesitating to supply Ukraine with high-impact weaponry such as long-range ballistic and cruise missiles. This cautious stance began to shift dramatically in 2023, marked by significant support, including main battle tanks, cluster bombs, Storm Shadow cruise missiles, and the pivotal American ATACMS for Ukraine's HIMARS units. Despite these substantial commitments, which initially raised concerns about escalation, the successful utilization of these systems by Ukraine in 2022 helped to alleviate fears, shifting the focus toward the potential depletion of Western arsenals. Years of peace, along with a focus on counter-terrorism, had not prepared the West for the intense demands of modern, high-intensity warfare, where sophisticated ammunition is consumed at an alarming rate. This concern is compounded by the complexity and vulnerability of the supply chains needed to produce and distribute modern precision munitions. Yet the Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen argued that supporting Ukraine, even at the expense of Western stockpiles, was a strategic necessity. In her view, a Russian defeat in Ukraine would ultimately enhance Western security more reliably than maintaining large arsenals at home. While Denmark's contribution of artillery might not decisively tip the scales of the war, Frederiksen hoped her bold move would catalyze broader European support, encouraging a more substantial collective effort. This hope seemed to be materializing when, at a Munich conference, Czech defense official Jan Jiras revealed that 800,000 artillery shells could be procured from non-Western stockpiles for Ukraine at a cost of $1.5 billion, proposing a feasible solution to swiftly bolster Ukraine's artillery capabilities. His announcement underscored a growing willingness among European nations to find innovative ways to support Ukraine's defense and maintain the momentum in its counteroffensive efforts. On March 8th, Czech President Petr Pavel announced that a group of 18 countries had funded the purchase of all of those shells in full. Germany alone would buy 180,000 rounds with a price tag of $618 million, which amounted to 40% of the total. Denmark also participated in the financing alongside Belgium, the Netherlands, and Canada. The effort that Denmark contributed to resulted in the procurement of about 400,000 of the shells. At about the same time, the Czechs identified a further 700,000 idle artillery shells that could be purchased for $1.8 billion. Ukraine's Western allies, including Denmark, have agreed to purchase these also. Thanks to Europe's collective efforts, Ukraine's artillery and shell shortage looks like it will end by this summer. When the Czech-brokered ammunition begins to arrive, the expected date of delivery is June. As the summer matures, Ukraine might begin to fire around 6,000 shells per day, 3 times as many as now. The number might grow further to 10,000 per day, now that the divided United States Congress has decided to deliver additional aid. Ukraine's shell hunger is about to end. And the way in which it will come to an end is an item of evidence in favor of PM Frederiksen's notion of the need for Europe to take the lead in its own defense. For her, defeating Russia in Ukraine now, even if it means a depletion of valuable military stockpiles at home, is a preferable option to using those weapons in a future on one's own doorstep in another, worse conflict down the line. But will the rest of Europe follow suit? Do you agree with PM Frederiksen? Should Western countries send much more of their available arsenals to Ukraine? Is this the best way for Europe to secure itself from future Russian aggression? Don't forget to let us know in the comments. Also, make sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons to help the channel and for more military analysis from military experts. Now go and check out why Russia can't stop US weapons, or click this other video instead.